Hello.
I know my excitement is.
Here we are.
I am so psyched about today. And it's going to be like, okay, Christopher, start this very but forget it. I can't. Just so excited about our Sailor Moon follow up.
I know.
Oh my god! And I just have to share with everyone. Has everyone watched Sailor Moon Cosmos? Okay, I just finished it like a half an hour ago, and I called Emilie, and this is my
He called. Hello.
Emilie.
This is all my fault.
But before we get into why it's your fault, I was weeping. I was crying so much. I was just like, oh my God. I was just on the floor weeping. And then you do the credits or whatever, and Emily's like, you have to watch the end. I'm like, really? And then I was weeping again. It was just, oh my God. Sailor Moon Cosmos. You have got
You have to watch it. You have to watch it.
Oh my, oh.
I know. Okay, I can't cry because I'm wearing makeup, but
no, I can't cry either. I'm all cried out. I was crying so much. It was so beautiful. It was so. Oh, and it's all Emily's fault. Okay,
it's all my fault. It's entirely my fault. It's okay.
So, Emilie, tell everyone why it's your fault. Okay. Well, first of all, let me introduce Emilie properly. For those of us who've come over here to Christopher Renstrom Astrology from our IG Lives, I've been doing IG Lives with co-host Emilie for a while now on our own astrology thing, and it was Emilie who really encouraged me to start a YouTube channel, and I did. And part of all of this was Emilie's commitment to Sailor Moon. And I was just like, Emilie, whatever. But then in my Capricornian way, I gave in. I also have a Pisces.
Eventually.
I gave in eventually, and I am completely, and just 15 minutes ago, weeping. Okay. But this is Emilie, and it's all her fault.
Hello.
Why is it your fault, Emilie? Tell us.
I think you just told them.
No, but you grew up with Sailor Moon, right?
Right. I did. I grew up with Sailor Moon. I grew up in the 90s with Cartoon Network and watching Sailor Moon in the evenings or wherever it was being distributed at the time. And yeah, thank you very much for the sweet comments. And hi, Ashley. It's good to see you in the chat. And so I grew up watching, cartoons, Cartoon Network with my brothers. And before Dragon Ball Z would play, which is what my brothers wanted to watch, there was Sailor Moon. So I would watch Sailor Moon or Pokemon or whatever anime was on before Dragon Ball Z, and then watch Dragon Ball Z. And sometimes I'd watch Dragon Ball Z too. But I remember, watching and wondering, and I always felt so, I always felt really close to the story of Diana and the story of the moon. And I knew about Greek mythology before I watched Sailor Moon. And I really felt very connected to this very strong representation of femininity and women just being girly, but also strong and not necessarily having to be masculine about their strength, because women do have a strength that isn't necessarily masculine. There's a feminine strength as well.
Thank God it's not masculine. Thank God it's feminine.
Right. Okay. It doesn't need to always be one way when things that can be strong in different ways. Right. And so that was kind of my first exposure to it, and also to the planets. And I had been exposed a little bit to astrology. Actually, ironically, my first experience and exposure to astrology was Chinese astrology at Chinese restaurants. On the menu that they would put down in front of you, they put the Chinese zodiac and what year you were born. And I'd always be like, Mom, what is your year? And my dad would be like, oh, she's the year of the rat or the rooster. I don't remember what it was, but
rat. It's about the rat. Okay.
Right. Okay. Then it's the same year as you. Yes. Okay. Or the year before you. So she might've been the boar or something like that.
Okay. Whatever.
And I was always but it said, funnily enough, it said that mine was the year of the horse. And I'm like, but I, read this description and I feel more strongly closer to the snake. So like actually led to me looking into like why the Chinese like zodiac was set up the way it was, and it doesn't actually correspond to our year, our like calendar year. It corresponds to the Lunar New Year, and it turned out I was born 2 days before the Lunar New Year, and so naturally I'm not year of the horse, I'm year of the snake. So
is it the lunar year, right?
Because it's the lunar year.
One of the many magnificent and marvelous differences between Chinese and Western astrology, or Western and Eastern astrology.
Right.
And one of those things is the calendar. You know, our calendar is a solar calendar.
Right.
But, you know, calendars in the Middle East and in Asia are lunar still to this day, and not even still to this day, like uninterrupted to this day.
Right.
Well, of course, right, your year hadn't ended yet, and that's why you related on that level. That's amazing.
Exactly. So it actually led me into like learning about my sun sign and learning about, you know, what was my moon sign. And I really, really wanted to find out that I had a Cancer moon, but I do not. I have a Capricorn moon.
It's okay. I still love you, honey.
Thanks.
With your Capricorn moon.
My hard ass Capricorn moon.
Shout out to Capricorn moon.
Shout out to our Capricorn moons out there. Just let us know. You send to come around. But so that really was my introduction, and then Sailor Moon further introduced me and gave me more like context for the planets, because I knew about the planets. I didn't know the planetary sigils. So I actually learned the planetary sigils through Sailor Moon because they show up on their foreheads.
Right, of course. So, like, the accessory you do not leave the house without. Okay.
Right. The forehead sigil. Right. Yes. So I also felt very strongly like related to Sailor Jupiter. I really loved Sailor Jupiter, but really it's all about Sailor Mars. You gotta love Sailor Mars.
What is that? Is that
it's a soda can? I got it at World Market.
No, is that a Sailor Mars soda can? And you didn't give me one. I hate you. No, I love you.
I'll get you one. I'll bring you one. Isn't it cute? This is the strawberry flavor. It's all about Sailor Mars.
Soda can.
Got, like, a little wand on it. It's so cute. It's so cute. I can't even bring myself to drink it. It's so cute.
Oh, are you wearing your Sailor Mars
heels? My Sailor Mars what? Heels? No. Oh, no, but I have my Luna light.
Okay, you've got your Luna light. Sailor Mars and her chic high heels. Okay, like her chic with high heels.
Okay, Sailor Mars. It's all about Sailor Mars. I love her.
Sailor Mars. Okay.
Yes. Okay, first of all, she's very spiritual. We love that.
Right.
Because and a shaman, and like you don't, so in Western astrology you don't see a lot of like the spiritual and shamanistic side.
Every scout said they had all the other scouts too.
I know. I saw the Mercury one, but I was like, I'm not sure if I really like dig the flavor, so I didn't get it. Sorry, okay. Mercury.
I interrupted. Okay, so
no, it's okay. So let's see, where was I? Oh yeah. So what I love about the depiction of Sailor Mars in the anime is you get all of this like energy that you don't normally see in Western astrology in the depiction of Mars itself, and in Mars, like, and in Aries. Like we do know that there are Aries out there who feel very strongly, very spiritual, very connected to, you know, spiritualism. But we, you know, it's not something we talk about. When we talk about spirituality, we talk more about water signs. And so seeing like these alternate depictions, these alternate concepts, or alternate, because they do line up with the planet. They do line up with the signs. You know, fire is a very spiritual energy. And it's very spirited.
Actually, what you're hitting on, which is really, really wonderful here, is that in Asian astrology, Eastern astrology, the planets are the elements. You know, here in Western astrology, the signs are the elements. Okay, the planets pass through zodiac signs, and they change their elemental temperament accordingly. You know, if Mars is in Aries, then it's a fiery Mars. If it moves on to Taurus, it's an earthy Mars, all right? But in Japanese astrology, which is this extraordinarily beautiful mix of Chinese, Babylonian, i.e. Hellenistic, Iranian, and also Tao. I mean, all of these come together in Japanese astrology. The planets themselves are the element. You know, Mercury, for instance, in Eastern astrology is water. Jupiter, Mercury is water, Saturn is earth. Okay, we can recognize those. Mars is fire, you know, and that's what you were talking about, Emilie, and we're going to circle back to that really quick. But then Venus is metal. Okay, metal is an element in Eastern astrology, and Jupiter is wood. Wood is an element in Eastern astrology. So the planets themselves, they don't transmute or change elemental makeup as they go through sign. They are that element. And so I'm just giving a quick backstory here.
Sure.
Mars is fire. Okay, it is the planet of fire, and so that's what I think you're sort of talking about here.
Yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
it definitely comes through in like the depiction of Mars in the anime. Sorry, just had like caught something in my throat. But I think that it's so I love how Naoko Takeuchi really like married all of these concepts so beautifully and so like succinctly. And you did a great job in the video that you released on it. I really loved it. It was so great. It was the video I've been asking you to make that video for like years, I think, at this point.
And you also helped with that video. And so our producer, Joe Santos, helped with that video.
Very much. Yeah.
Like
Joe did a lot.
Moon, I could not have done it with my loved ones and friends. Okay.
Just like Sailor Moon.
Just like Sailor Moon. It's one of the beautiful messages of Sailor Moon.
We do have to talk about Sailor Moon. So Sailor Moon, let's see, like, what is it? So I love how in Sailor Moon, like Naoko Takeuchi takes this this like girl, and she's just like kind of an everyday normal, you know, human girl. Right. And then suddenly she's a moon goddess, right? But she's also still really bad at school. She's clumsy. She's forgetful. She falls asleep in class. She eats all of her lunch before lunch. Like, she's just kind of
cowardly. Okay,
person.
It shows up in Sailor Moon Cosmos. She's cowardly. You know, she's not someone who goes
in a way.
And confrontations.
She definitely like relies very much on the Sailor Scouts and on Mamoru and on Chibiusa. And but she does have a lot of courage. She has a lot of inner strength. And I think that like I really loved how that mirrors the Diana from Greek mythology, and how, you know, Diana has her harem of women. Artemis has her harem of women. They can't have boyfriends. They they belong to her. They are warriors. They're hunters. They and they only fight at night.
Right.
You know, like
they hunt at night.
They hunt at night. They move. They're predatory through, you know, the cycles of the moon, and they you know, woe be unto the man who touches them.
Well, and we all know what happened to Actaeon. Okay.
Oh, what happened to Actaeon?
Actaeon was a great Greek hero who espies Artemis at her toilette. Okay, which is bathing naked in the, you know, you know, the pond or the river or the brook. Okay, because the moon also in astrology rules over wild lands, those lands outside of the town or the kingdom. Those forests that you're told not to go into are all Artemis or all Lunar ruled. And so Actaeon, he's hunting actually, and he espies Artemis bathing with her maidens, and they're like, oh, you know, and Actaeon's like, you know, like
Actaeon's like, yeah, hell yeah.
You know, and Artemis in a moment, like, you know, transforms him into a deer, into an
Oh
elk.
no.
And Actaeon flees where he has seen Artemis
And
and
they're like,
her
she's like,
sisters.
go get him.
He flees, he's racing, and his dogs, who are looking around for Actaeon, their master, smell the elk, or they smell the deer, and they rip him apart and bring him down. So he suffers this horrible bloody end at his own dogs. Right, Actaeon got turned into dog food big time. Okay, but it's what's also fascinating about Artemis. Her Roman name is Diana, is that she and Helios, the Apollo, are twins. Okay, they're born at the same time, but actually, and this is what I found so fascinating, actually, Artemis is born before Apollo. Okay, so
Right.
Apollo is the sun in Greek mythology, and Artemis is the moon. Artemis is born before the sun, Apollo, her brother. When she's born, she immediately turns around and helps to deliver her brother. Okay.
Classic elder sister energy.
I know, classic elder sister energy. Okay. She immediately knows what to do to, be the midwife to help birth her brother. And so Artemis, the lunar goddess in Greek mythology, always came before the sun.
And that makes sense, because Cancer does proceed Leo, or
Leo in the zodiacal, right? In the zodiacal order. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I love that. I also love that like Sailor Moon is always a little bit in love with like all of her Sailor Scouts, which I think is also like really big Artemis like vibes. Like Artemis was totally in love with all of her harem, like all of her worshippers.
It's a sisterhood. It's a
sisterhood.
And this is and Greek mythology, not Greek mythology, ancient Greek civilization went through a very heavy patriarchal system where women were treated as less than, which is interesting because in Egypt that was not the case, for instance. I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, patriarchy, like man spreaded throughout the Mediterranean or something like that. But Greece went through a very strong patriarchal, and so there was always a sort of apprehension or anxiety about, the religious orders or the religious beliefs that had come before, which were usually the goddesses. And so there's always been that kind of like anxiety. But she has a sisterhood, which is Sailor Moon has this sisterhood, even at the penultimate part of Sailor Moon Cosmos, which I have to be referring to because I just like watch it.
Right. We're processing.
We're still processing. She draws upon that sisterhood. She draws upon that love, and it's an absolute theme in Sailor Moon. Whether it's you're reading the manga or you're going Sailor Moon Crystal, Sailor Moon Eternity or Eternal, and then Sailor Moon Cosmos. It's an absolute theme that this light, which because of the lunar cycle grows in light and weakens, loses its light, only to begin the light again. In so many different Western civilizations, that was seen as a lesser thing, but it's actually a very powerful and strong thing, and in astrology, even in contemporary readings of astrology, the moon no longer takes a back seat to the sun. Okay, especially in night charts, a lot of times the moon in a nighttime chart, if you were born at night, may actually be more of what you identify with than even your sun sign. And so this is something that's really sort of been in the background for Western astrology for a while, but it's really coming out more and more. But what I love about Sailor Moon is that her power, like her confidence in herself, can wax and then it can wane.
Yeah.
And that's what makes her so, don't you think? That's what makes her so human.
It does. And that's what makes her so, fun and so relatable, that she's not some invincible and ultimately strong heroine. Like she's very, she's very deeply human. She's very deeply, she can be understood by the average reader or by, anybody. Yeah. Like men, women, little girls, little boys, anybody who wants to read Sailor Moon can very much relate to her and to any of the Sailor Senshi. and how they interact with their day-to-day lives. I mean, the only ones that don't feel as relatable are the outer sensi. So like Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, only because like, but in the Sailor Cosmos arc, and we can get into that in a little bit, like
Sure.
they finally start to become relatable. They're like going to high school. They're, taking like Pluto is the school nurse. Like they're interacting with the general public in the same way that the inner sensi are.
Right.
So, and that's, that's very relatable. That's very, that then you really start to feel very strongly about them, which is very important for that entire story.
And if I can jump on in here for a quick
Yeah.
sec, this parallels astrology. All right. In astrology, astrology we know is 2,500 plus years old.
Right.
In the West. In the East, astrology is more like 3,500 years old. Okay, that I just want everyone to sort of like, whoa, take in. Okay, and astrology, by the way, is not a science. It's not a religion. Astrology is a calendar. That's why every major civilization on this planet, whether it was Mesoamerican, Middle Eastern, Asian, developed some form of astrology. It was in order to tell time. What I like to add quickly to that is that these are the astrologies we know about. Okay, there are countless astrologies that we probably don't know about because they, they might not have survived by being passed down intergenerationally, or their artifacts, have yet to emerge. There is a circle right now that's been discovered in northern Africa, which looks like it's older than Stonehenge. It's not as large; it's smaller, but what they're theorizing is that these stones were clearly set up in order to calculate the rising and the setting of stars. That's astrology. Mm-hmm. So in traditional astrology, what's called traditional astrology, we work with the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Okay. In 1781, there was the discovery of Uranus, which was called the modern planet. Uranus was discovered at the midpoint between the American War for Independence and the French Revolution. So Uranus was associated with revolution and change, After that was discovered Neptune in 1846, and then Pluto in 1930. Getting back to Emilie's point, these were called the outer planets or the modern planets, okay, because they were discovered in the modern age. 1781 is coming towards the end of the Enlightenment. 1846 is right before the Civil War here in the United States. Is maybe about 14 years or whatever before that. Okay, and then Pluto, of course, all bets are off with this discovery of Pluto, 1930, the beginning of the atomic age. Okay, mm-hmm. and so the modern planets, when I was learning about them, were kind of called the generational planets. They were outer, they were remote, and that's because they took so long to travel across the sky. In reality, it's because astrologers didn't really know what to say about them yet. Okay, they had only had the planets around for like maybe 200 years, as opposed to centuries and centuries and centuries of the older ones. We're still really exploring the modern planets, and they impact and have a lot to say. But getting back to Emilie's point, that's why the outer planets, the outer sensi, the outer sailor guardians, have this kind of more adult or remote, or not, they're not really as personable to Usagi as the modern ones are. And I just sort of wanted to break that down in terms of the history of astrology.
That's great. I love that. Yes, thank you. And that actually brings us to like a good place to address like one of the questions that came up in the comments of the video a lot was, why is Saturn introduced last? Yeah. And when we were talking about it, because we spent like the last, like, I would say like the last year, like processing Sailor Moon and like thinking about it and discussing it and like having deep conversations about the different like reasons why maybe she did some of these things. Mm-hmm. One of the questions that came up was why is, Saturn introduced last? And I think that it's, there's a couple of reasons why Saturn takes on this role of death. It takes on the role, Saturn takes on this role of the great the great reset button, so to speak, in the third
Which,
season.
which she is, but she introduces herself as the guardian of silence.
Right.
And the guardian of ruin.
Yes.
Which are two very good points. Yeah.
Very good points. But I think in conjunction with the moderns, so the moderns get introduced first. Actually, Pluto's the first outer that we learn about in the Sailor Moon series in the, chronological order of things. And then it's Uranus and Neptune, and then it's Saturn. So I personally think that Saturn was introduced last because Saturn is really the bridge between the moderns and the ancient rulers of astrology signs.
Yeah.
Like, Saturn really is, because Saturn ruled both Capricorn and Aquarius for, thousands and thousands of years. And then Uranus was discovered. And so they're like, okay, well, I guess you have to share Aquarius, Saturn, with Uranus.
Right. Move over.
Move over. And
Right.
then Neptune was discovered. And then Neptune co-ruled Pisces. Then with Jupiter. And then Pluto was discovered. And they're like, well, let's break the cycle. And we'll go all the way over here to Scorpio. And Scorpio and Pluto are co-ruling Scorpio. So
yeah,
I think that it bridges into this, going into the other planets and the introductions of that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you go in the Chaldean order, and I just throw out a big word out there to everybody.
That's big.
Chaldean order, what's that? If you go and look in the video that we did for on Christopher Renstrom Astrology, the Astrology of Sailor Moon, there is a beautiful image. It's also in the manga. It's from the manga. There's a gorgeous image that Takeuchi, it's gorgeous. It's Sailor Saturn with her introduction, and Uranus is crying out. Sailor Uranus is crying out, oh, this is the planet of ruin. Okay, and behind her is the Chaldean order of planets. Okay, and what they are is that it appears as an arc. You start with the moon, which was the planet of the lowest sphere. You went to Mercury and Venus. Earth never appears because in astrology, everything is seen from the Earth's point of view. And in Sailor Moon, there isn't a Sailor guardian of Earth because
it's her and Mamoru, really.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's okay. So in the Chaldean order, it goes, the moon is the lowest of the heavens, Mercury, Venus, Mars, because Mars is outside the orbit of Earth, Jupiter, Saturn. Saturn was known as the planet of the seventh heaven. Okay, that is the highest you could ascend in the heavens. And if you're familiar with Dante's Paradiso, you can only go as high, which is actually all about the planets. Because I didn't know that. We all know Dante's Inferno, which is the descent. And Takeuchi does this in Sailor Moon Cosmos, by the way. It's the descent. Yeah, it's the descent down into the seven hells, which are then mirrored by the seven heavens. There's a beautiful image towards the end of Sailor Moon Cosmos where she's like on one knee, like genuflecting, but she's actually resting and sort of pulling herself up on her scepter. But then she's mirrored with a dark Sailor Moon underneath. And this is what Dante's comedy is about, are the descent down into the seven hells, and then Paradiso, which isn't as well known, which is the ascent through the seven heavens, which were the seven planets. And so Saturn stood as the last. So Saturn was seen as the highest you could go before you entered into the realm of fixed stars or eternity. Okay, so that's part of the reason why that's just to give you back up there, Emily, with the bridge between the ancient planets and the modern planets. What we also see is that if you go Cancer, the moon, Sun, Leo, Virgo, Mercury, Venus, Libra, Scorpio, Mars, Sagittarius, Jupiter, Capricorn, Saturn, Aquarius, Saturn, then you start coming back to the sun and moon again.
Right.
Pisces is Jupiter. Aries is Mars. Taurus is Venus. Gemini is Mercury, and you come back to the moon. So in a lot of cases, the astrological model starts with the moon. Okay. if you look at the planet that is opposite the moon, and this is why I think Takeuchi brings in Saturn last. If you look at the planet that's opposite moon, okay, the moon is Cancer. What is the zodiac sign that rules? Thank you. There it is, the Chaldean order.
Okay, I love this image. I remember reading the manga and like snapshotting this image to you. Okay, finish your thing.
I have to finish my point. If you go Sun in Cancer and you count 6 zodiac signs away, you get to Capricorn. The ruler of Capricorn is Saturn. So the moon was closest to us. If you see, I'm pointing like I can point on this, but if you see on the Chaldean order that she illustrates here, the moon is right above Saturn's head, right there. You see, no, that's not it, Joe. You have to come on down. Come all the way down. Yeah. Okay, there it is. That's the moon. You see the crescent moon. Okay, right? You see the crescent moon on the left hand. Okay, that's the moon. And then we're going to go to Mercury. We're going to go to Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and then Saturn right there at the top before we hit the arc of the fixed stars. So Saturn is the last. Okay, and that's why I think Takeuchi saves Saturn for last. She's kind of saying in her own way, okay, we've got the moderns, but honestly, Saturn is last. And Saturn is the one who really operates as a kind of doppelganger or a twin to Sailor Moon, or maybe even, as Emilie, you've suggested, really Chibiusa, where, but it's Sailor Moon actually, where Sailor Moon has this lovely childhood with lots of friends and surrounded by loved ones. Saturn, who's introduced last in the introduction of the Guardians, comes from an abusive home where her body has been abused, and where she's even being treated like a mule. Okay, what I mean by a mule is that heroin used to be trafficked into the United States, with it being imbibed in people, and then they would sort of like be open. Okay, like everyone's like, what the hell? But yeah. I'm not doing a great job of describing all of it, but it was bodies carrying. Well, in the same idea, Saturn is carrying. She's
a host. I don't know if a mule is the right thing to say. Okay, a host.
I just remembered that from the old. I know everyone's like, okay, why would you know this word term?
It's like.
Her body is a host for.
Hold on, we need to recover.
Isn't Sailor Saturn's body a host for Pharaoh 9 or for the
Pharaoh 90?
Pharaoh 90, right.
Yeah.
But it's Saturn's story is like the dark reflection of Usagi. Anyway, that's my thing for why because the glaive is also the scythe, which was always associated with death, the cutting down of wheat in the field, the cutting down of lives, in their life and being rendered dead, to harvested. Those were all things that were associated with Saturn. And Saturn, until the discovery of Pluto, was all of those attributes. Okay, so when we're like, okay, Saturn does reborn, Saturn does a transformation, things that are associated to Pluto. Before 1930, Saturn ruled all of those attributes. Then in 1930, with the discovery of Pluto in astrology, those attributes of the underworld, of minerals, of crystals were moved from Saturn over to Pluto's column. And Takeuchi plays with that, I think, quite creatively. Don't you, Emilie?
Oh, yeah, very much. I think it's really interesting how she plays with the ancients and the moderns and the different types of Western and Eastern rulerships that they respectively portray. I think it's genius. I think she's just a genius. Yeah, I love her so much. Our Pisces queen, Naoko Takeuchi, which our Pisces queen. And that so there's so much I want to say about Saturn, because obviously I love Saturn a lot for various reasons.
She's your sailor guardian.
She is, well, Sailor Uranus is my sailor guardian, but
Sailor Saturn is your ancient
other sailor guardian.
Other sailor guardian.
But I remember watching the series in the 90s. So I grew up on the 90s series, and the series in the 90s doesn't go past I don't think it really even goes far into the eternal arc. Like at least the American dubbed version, like the Japanese version goes in, but like the English dubbed version did not go into it. And I was too young. Well, we didn't really have a lot of access to the tools that we have now to watch, subtitled anime. And like I grew up in the dark ages, kids. Like we had to get like bootleg versions of things. We had to we had to work hard to get subtitled versions of anime that were not being released in the United States. And it took a lot of commitment to that to get it. And I didn't get a lot of exposure to Sailor Moon in the early 2000s, until finally they started doing Crystal. And like, I, suddenly started getting into the YouTube, like Sailor Moon musical, side of things, which is a whole other thing. But I wanted to talk about Sailor Saturn and how when I watched that in the 90s, the whole arc of it, um, I was really struck by like how she's constantly in pain, which is like such a Saturn thing, pain,
Right, right,
burdens,
right,
um, the being a host for something that you don't want, something that conflicts with you. So the inner turmoil of that.
mhm,
But what I love the most, just
yeah,
like revisiting it, so many years later, is how she's reborn.
right,
Like she becomes just this little she keeps getting reborn, and she gets to do it over, and she gets to have a happy life this time. Now that Sailor Moon is in her life, now that she doesn't have to come and hit the giant reset button anymore. In the eternal arc, she could be best friends with Chibiusa. She
right,
can have like this really great childhood and be raised by the three outer planetary guardians. And like there's a lot of really wonderful, like Saturn getting flipped into this really positive respect, because she did take it very dark. She did take it very much into the sad astro side of Saturn, that
right,
she now has to do like this absolute, like, now you have prosperity, now you have the golden age, now you have the you know the beautiful side of Saturn.
right, right, right. Saturn was a planet. Saturn was always associated with old. Okay, because when the ancients looked at the planets in the sky, Saturn was the dimmest light, and it took the longest to move across the sky. So it was always associated with the elderly. Saturn then becomes associated with the disenfranchised, people who are spurned by society. That also fell within the realm of Saturn. What's fascinating when I hear you talking is that Saturn is really Saturn Saturn's sacrifice at the end of what we're calling the Sailor Crystal plotline, because it's all collected into that on Hulu, which you can get to watch. Um, really mirrors that original sacrifice that the rabbit makes in the original Japanese folktale.
Yes,
Okay.
it does. It's so great how many things get mirrored like this.
Oh yeah, and she's really like a poet. I mean, she's not like a poet, she is a poet. I mean, there's a musical variations on a theme structure that she
Hmm.
plays with. What do you want? She's a Pisces. This is,
Right,
this is Pisces view of life and living.
right.
This is how they live. But what you have is that there is a Japanese folk tale in which the man on the moon, because in the East, the moon is male, okay, which was another flip that Takeuchi does by making, by electing to go female. Like she
Hmm.
really is going to invoke the Western mythologies and traditions here and mix them
Hmm.
with Japanese. But the man on the moon comes down to Earth and as a beggar, okay, and who is hungry. And this is something that you see in Japanese folklore. This is something that you see in Greek mythology a lot, where it's where the phrase "the gods go a begging" comes from. The gods would appear on Earth as beggars. And she's even doing this with the choice of Isagi as a typical schoolgirl. The gods appear on the earth as beggars, as people that, we would all make assumptions of and maybe even mock or deride or ignore. And so the gods would judge the virtue of a human being, And
Hmm.
here in this folk tale, the man on the moon comes to earth as a beggar, really to sort of judge the virtue of these living creatures. And I think if I remember correctly, it's a monkey and it's a monkey, fox, and a bunny, I think, are the original three. And so maybe the monkey gets fruit, the fox gets a fish. No, it's a fox, and then there's another one. Anyway, I apologize, but there's three animals. I got fox and bunny. Okay, so the fox, hunts and gets something. I think it's a monkey gets fruit from the tree, and the rabbit, knowing that it's a human being, and it only eats grass, at this fire that the moon god has, sitting by a campfire, the rabbit throws itself into the fire, okay, and kills itself. And the moon god fetches him out of the fire and says, "Why are you doing this?" And the bunny is dying, and he restores the bunny. And he's like, "Why did you do that?" And the rabbit said, "You were hungry. All I do is eat grass. I know humans don't eat grass, but you do eat meat. So I was sacrificing myself." Even that motif that I just described with you continues through Sailor Moon, where there's sacrifice and restoration.
Mm-hmm.
But where we're going with this is that Saturn also at the end makes that sacrifice to take the dark energy through the time portal that Pluto opens, and to battle it throughout all of time. And what happens in the Sailor Moon story is that because the moon was always associated with reincarnation, as a result of Saturn's noble sacrifice, Saturn is restored as a little girl. Saturn is reborn, Saturn is reincarnated.
Right.
So that's the moon acting on,
well, as an infant.
Saturn, making Saturn an infant and reintroducing Saturn reborn. This is a different idea of rebirth than what is associated with Pluto and astrology. Okay, because the idea of the moon, of course, was that there was always rebirth. And in Neoplatonism, the reason why the moon becomes full, all right, is because the moon would collect souls who had died and departed. Okay. And as
like the way station.
Yeah, the souls would gather and become part of the moon, and it would grow full. And then as the moon lost its light, it was emitting or releasing the souls back up into the stars and the universe. Okay, this is Neoplatonism, which had a very different view of the moon than other philosophies and other arcana.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's beautiful. And that makes a lot of sense.
It's in Hermes Trismegistus, actually. If anyone's familiar with Hermes Trismegistus,
I'm gonna have to take it out.
Okay. With Emilie.
Hermes Trismegistus, like the three magicians.
The three-faced Hermes, the three-faced god. It's one of the appellations of Mercury, of Hermes. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. Like, so interesting that like kind of hit me very hard. So I also just sort of want to say, like, an eternal Saturn growing up like in 6 months is just very Saturnian of her. She's like an infant for like a month, and then 6 months later she's a full-on teenager. or young adult, or like,
she's a
9 years old. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how old she is at any given point. But when she transforms, I think she's like around 12, 13. But if she's like in her human form, she's like 9-ish, maybe 8 or 9, maybe 10. I don't know, but it's great.
It's age fluid. Sailor Moon is age fluid.
Age fluid. We've got all sorts of all sorts of fluidity in Sailor Moon. And so if you grew up with the 90s anime and you're familiar with Uranus and Neptune, you knew them in the 90s as cousins. And if you had a cousin like I did, I mean, my cousin and I talked about Sailor Moon all the time. She was a big part of the reason why I got into Sailor Moon.
Oh.
And then when we were watching Sailor Moon and we see Uranus and Neptune being introduced as cousins, we were like, what? You know, this isn't how cousins act.
And how do cousins act?
No, not necessarily romantically, but
Uranus and Neptune, right? Exactly.
yeah, I think it was always very funny and weird. And I think I remember being upset when I found out that Uranus was one of my ruling planets because of this. Because I was like, it was just strange. And like the American censors made it like very uncomfortable. It didn't have to be uncomfortable. They could have just kept it what it was,
Right.
but
Right.
it became weird. Anyway, I digress. The great part about Uranus showing up and dressing as a man and, you know, passing as a man and being a woman. And then, you know, after revealing that she's Sailor Uranus, she just sort of is like, all right, great. So the cat's out of the bag. I can just be whoever I am, except for when I'm racing cars. And then I have to be masculine.
Why not?
Which is like fine. But I love how Uranus and Neptune only work when they want to. Like they're independently, randomly wealthy. Like, Neptune's just like playing concerts all over the world whenever she feels like. And Uranus is like racing cars and flying helicopters and like doing all sorts of crazy stuff. Pluto's like a researcher. And of course, Pluto's a researcher and in science.
What's fascinating is what Pluto is researching.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about Eternal and the Eternal arc. I think this is a good segue.
Isn't Pluto connected to genetics research?
No, she was researching like the star systems, right?
Oh, she's researching star systems. Okay,
of course she is.
Right, which is going to take us back. And this is what's, I mean, I'm going to say this is what's so fascinating. Everything's fascinating. Okay, if you are not familiar with Sailor Moon, please get the manga or watch Sailor Moon Crystal, followed by Sailor Moon Eternal, followed by like 15 Kleenex boxes of Sailor Moon Cosmos, okay, which are all right now on Netflix. And they're just very, very powerful.
It just came out.
What's really fascinating here are the mother themes. Yeah, Pluto, you're right. Pluto is like a researcher of stars and astronomers. And what she did with Pluto, this is my theory or my read on what she did with Pluto, because Saturn is the element of Earth in Eastern astrology. The moderns are not associated to elements, so they're kind of like freed of, okay, and they're not associated to elements. Pluto, Saturn is very much the underworld because it's the underworld in the Earth. Okay, it's we experience underworld as Earth. Pluto is in charge of space-time. And so the underworld that Pluto is working with, or the idea of terminus that Pluto is working with, is stellar. It's not geocentric. Okay, Saturn's realm is geocentric. All right, the underworld Hades exists on the planet Earth. Pluto's introduction, she's really opening us up ultimately for Sailor Moon Cosmos, because we're going to be going into the cauldron, into the womb of the galaxy itself, and we're going to be experiencing the lifespan of stars. Yeah, Takeuchi goes there, okay, and she's using Pluto to go there. So Pluto really starts taking on, Pluto's like the parental guardian.
Oh, yeah.
Also the mother guardian. I mean, Pluto is the one who's really mothering Saturn. You know, so the two of them are linked because of their underworld and their melancholic natures, their sense of loneliness, and isolation, and standing on the brink of time. As Saturn stands on the brink of the known planets and what exists beyond are the modern planets and the unknown, Pluto is opening up space-time, and Pluto's going to raise our gaze, take our gaze to basically the cosmic cauldron, it's called. It's also invoked by one of the starlights as uterus.
Wait, 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 wait. You are skipping ahead. We are in Eternal.
Okay, but I just wanted to, I just want.
Don't bring in uterus, please. It's just an attack.
Well, no, actually, Emilie, no, it's not. It's not just an attack. And stay with me for a moment here. Astronomers are dealing with the idea of where are stars born. Okay, and that was associated in Sailor Moon with the galactic center, with the place where stars are born. So there is a uterus, there is a womb. This is where it all comes together at the end of the Sailor Moon story, epic, really, is in the cosmic womb. And that is a known thing. And that actually has been passed down through the generations and the ages, because it became a natural question: where were stars born? Where do stars come from? And so Saturn, by being the sailor associated to time and space, opens up, directs our gaze to that. And this is why it always comes back to the moon. The moon is the mother. The moon carries the child. The moon is the womb. The moon is associated to nurturing. All right. And so Pluto becomes kind of like an Uber or a modern version on that, on a larger level. And Sailor Moon, in her ultimate, I guess we call it an apotheosis or something, becomes the mother of us all. She goes to that final point. The reason I'm stretching out to all of that is actually to bring it back to the simplicity of choice of Sailor Moon as being the progenitor of all of this, rather than the sun. In Western astrology, the sun is seen as, the giver of life, but in Eastern, the primary light is the lunar. It's the lunar calendar, and also Takeuchi's choice of going with the moon as really being the planetary figure that everyone else revolves around.
Yes, I think that's it brings an interesting point up too about, the sun and the sun's role in Sailor Moon. While we have Mamoru, which he does represent the prince of the Earth Kingdom, Endymion, and he's the reincarnation of him. I think one of the reasons I mean, at least I like to talk about him as a representation of the sun is because the Earth wouldn't have life without the sun. We wouldn't have life without our proximity to the sun, and we couldn't, and the moon also shines with the sun.
Right.
So I think that's the important role of the sun in Sailor Moon, the sun as a center of life and a source of light. But we always see Sailor Moon as this, not just the reflector of the sun's light, but as a, Mamoru has the golden crystal. And
Hieroscomos. It's Hieroscomos. It's the marriage of sun and moon.
Exactly. Right. So I think that, introducing the sun as Mamoru is an interesting twist on how we would normally see the sun, and so I did just want to kind of bring it to a point where we could talk a little bit about Eternal and the arc of Eternal and the asteroids a little bit.
Okay.
And how that's how it's introduced, because the role of the sun in Eternal is also duplicated by the spirit Helios, who comes to Chibiusa.
Right.
Who's her version of the sun, who's her version of
Mamoru.
Her father, Mamoru, and and her source of light in a way. So I think that by having these little parallels that Naoko Takeuchi has set up, she's created this very complex but very simple, like you said, representation of motherhood, of creation. And some of the notes that I was taking, while watching Cosmos in anticipation of, speaking on this live is, your mother is the first body that you experience. And the moon represents the body. there are lots of things that go on in Sailor Moon that impact the bodies of the people in Tokyo, the people on Earth.
Right.
Mamoru's health almost is like a barometer of how the population is doing, you know, the population of Earth.
That's
If
a great,
Mamoru's,
right.
yeah, if Mamoru's not feeling well, like shit's getting real. Sorry for the swear, but like it's
Okay.
getting real in the universe of Sailor Moon. Like the 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 big battle is nigh. The enemies are close, and he's always, you know, very much like kind of he's a very strong source of strength in the beginning, but then he becomes more of a source of hope and faith, and for Usagi to continue fighting, for Usagi to continue going,
Right.
and make the sacrifices that she needs to make in order to perpetuate society, in order to continue giving life to society.
Right. Right. It's like the Earth itself, and then Mamoru is also Earth. You know, the Earth itself registers that something's wrong. You know, like if there's a drop in the insect population, which we're experiencing, this is a result of climate change and what's going on with the Earth. I mean, I can tell you as, you know, I can tell you as having been on this planet as long as I have, there's been an enormous drop in the insect population, you know, and so these are signs that something is up with the Earth. And Mamoru, especially in Eternal, doesn't he have that kind of black rose in his chest? You know, so he, there's a black rose that's growing in his chest, and he has a cough, and he's got like
that's right, the cough. Like he's got, yeah. So I think that's really interesting because Mamoru's like going to college for medicine. Mamoru's like, he has healing powers, especially in the manga. Like they don't really show it in the anime, but in the manga he can heal people.
Yeah.
And he heals magically, which is very Apollo of him.
Apollo,
And
Greek mythology.
yes,
Absolutely. Apollo is father of Hippocrates.
Exactly. And Asclepius is related to Apollo.
You got it. It's Asclepius,
Yes.
and that's the Hippocratic oath. Thank you for bringing me back into. Yes, Asclepius is Apollo's son, who's raised by Chiron, and taught the healing arts by Chiron. Asclepius is Apollo's son, and Hippocrates, we take the Hippocratic oath. Hippocrates is a known person associated with medicine who apparently learned the healing arts from Asclepius.
Asclepius.
Apollo, the sun, is the healing god.
Right. And so having Mamoru as this he's kind of the medic for the group. Like he's not really going in and charging into the fight. And in the early seasons he does, but like he kind of takes more of a backseat in the last two story arcs. And somebody mentioned in the chat that Helios and Helios and Mamoru have a psychic connection. They can telepathically communicate with each other, especially that's definitely notable in the manga. And when Helios, this spirit that comes to Chibiusa in her dreams, is getting he's a guardian of the earth in a way. He does have a relationship to Mamoru, and he has been like a guardian of the earth, and he's basically warning about this, you know, new threat, which is the kind of big bad of the season, Nephalania or what have you. And she's come to Earth to really try and like corrupt it in a way. Right. And it all happens. What I love, this is my favorite part. It all happens in an eclipse.
Right.
So it's the fall of the rulers. It's the fall of the sun and the moon. And even Usagi says that her powers are weakest during an eclipse.
Right. And just to sort of give in the background really quickly here, there are two types of eclipses in astrology. There's a solar eclipse, a lunar eclipse. A solar eclipse takes place when the moon comes in front of the sun and blocks out the light of the sun. Most dramatically, just this past year, we had a solar eclipse in which the sun is blotted from the sky, and everything falls into darkness. Okay, eclipses basically in astrology mean lights out in heaven. Okay, that's the easiest way to think of an eclipse. And we have a guest appearance from Emilie's dog.
Stella. Stella the star.
Okay, Stella the star. All right. So a solar eclipse is the moon coming in front of the sun. Its most dramatic appearance is in the day when daylight disappears. Okay, that was associated with the fall of people in power, because the sun was always associated to kings. We have King Endymion from the King of Earth, Endymion from Sailor Moon. So a solar eclipse was the fall of kings or anyone in a public office. And then a lunar eclipse takes place at a full moon, when the moon is fullest at night, and the earth moves between the sun and the moon, and its shadow falls on the moon. So the moon at night all of a sudden is eclipsed. It falls into darkness, which, by the way, is another earth-moon connection, because in a lunar eclipse, it's the earth's shadow that causes the moon to disappear from the nighttime sky. Lunar eclipses in astrology, because the moon in astrology rules over our body, the moon in astrology also ruled over the body politic. Okay, that is the governing body, the populace. So lunar eclipses traditionally in astrology were associated to disasters happening on the land, like, for instance, a pestilence or a famine or floods or fires. Okay, so the lunar eclipse would be the populace put into peril. So a solar eclipse was always the death of a king or a queen, or a lunar eclipse was, a pestilence being laid on the land, or a famine, or some sort of natural disaster. And so those were traditionally, for centuries, the two general interpretations of an eclipse in astrology.
And that's exactly why it's so important that this is happening during a solar eclipse. So you have I think there's this whole thing where Chibiusa tries to go back to this. She's from the future. She tries to go back to the future, and she can't make it because there's a solar eclipse, and she gets sent right back by her mom. Hey, sorry, keep the kid for a little longer. Thanks, past me. And they have this whole interesting arc about, corrupting the people of the town with a circus, and instead of just sort of entertaining the people of the town with the circus, but at the same time, creeping into their souls, taking what's good about them. It's the very typical Sailor Moon villain arc of corrupting somebody and taking what's good about them.
And what that invokes, and I don't know if Takeuchi was familiar with this, but there is a famous horror movie called Circus of Souls.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, fun.
There's a famous horror movie called Circus of Souls, where the circus comes to town and it kidnaps the souls of people. So I kind of took that as Takeuchi working off of that reference. Okay, but yeah, it was the idea of Circus of Souls kidnapping or abducting the souls of people. And of course, this is what the Sailor asteroids, who originally appeared as nemesis, are doing. They're trying to abduct the souls of the Sailor guardians, which ultimately takes us to the revelation. Is it okay if I share this revelation right now?
I'm not sure.
It takes us ultimately to the revelation of the Sailor crystals. Okay, that so far we've been introduced to this first model, which is that the Sailor guardians occupy host bodies, or they've been reincarnated in bodies, right? Okay, but now we learn in Sailor Eternal that it's not just the past life. There's an actual crystal, right? Do I have this right? There's an actual crystal that's associated to the planet,
yeah,
that inhabits the person. Okay, so it's not
Right.
a sailor guardian inhabiting a person. There's a planetary crystal, which goes back to the Eastern understanding of each planet was an element. So there's a planetary
Mhm.
crystal that's being carried within the guardian, which is then housed in the person.
Right. It's what gives them their sailor guardian or sailor essentially like powers. Um
And
and
dominions. All of a sudden, Mars becomes the what Princess of Mars, right? The ruler of Mars. I
well,
mean,
she was always the princess of Mars,
but she is the foal with the
right, she
discovery of the
comes
Mars.
into the
She
yeah,
evolves.
she
Yeah,
levels up.
she
Right.
levels.
She
Yeah,
levels up. And that's part of what the Eternal Arc is about. I mean, it's also about Chibiusa finding her guardians, which I love that they're asteroids, you
right,
know, that you have Juno, you have Ceres, you have Vesta, you have Pallas. And it's funny because you don't have this, she doesn't have the same like relationship or experience with them. Yeah, there they are. She doesn't have the same like relationship or experience with them that Sailor Moon has with her guardians because they're asteroids. I mean, they're not like we don't have them in their everyday life. They exist in the 30th century protecting Princess Chibiusa. Like it's very, you know, kind of separate from the viewer. But they do become important in the next story arc. And they're actually, you know, in almost every single season, you know, a new character gets introduced and it's always like they're an enemy, but they were and they turned out to be somebody who was very useful halfway through the story. But in this case, they were the enemy. And
right,
then they turned out to be the actual guardians of the
right,
person they were trying to attack. They had just been brainwashed.
right. They had been their souls had been abducted into the circus.
Right.
Joe,
Exactly.
Joe, can we go back to that sailor, the sailor asteroids, really quick? Is that a possibility? What I wanted to point out here, which is also really important, what Takeuchi does at first with the Sailor Guardians is we are now seeing feminine versions. Okay. The moon and Venus have always been feminine in Western astrology, but Mercury was not feminine, Mars was not feminine, Jupiter was not feminine, Saturn was not feminine. So we see feminine versions. Okay. And, or feminine energy, planetary energies. What's so remarkable about the introduction of the Sailor asteroids is when the asteroids were really introduced into modern astrology, which is around the late 60s and 70s. This was the first time that you had the introduction into astrological practice of female goddesses in their own right. Okay. I mean, you had the moon, that's a female goddess. Okay. And then you had Venus, that's a female goddess. Okay. But then, and it was a big complaint with astrology, they were so outnumbered. You know, you've got the sun who's male, Mercury male, Mars male, you know, whatever. And so by Takeuchi making this choice, what she's introducing as the Sailor Guardians, or as the asteroids for Chibiusa, are first, an asteroid is not a planet in astrology, it's like a junior planet. Okay. Asteroids don't rule over signs, planets rule over signs. Okay.
Right.
If you can sort of remember that distinction in astrology. So a planet will ultimately rule the sign that an asteroid is in. An asteroid is always genuflecting or bowing before the planet that rules the sign that the asteroid
Right.
is in. This is key to reading asteroids in a chart. But what you have here, the first of the asteroids to be discovered, I think it's like 1801, is Ceres. Okay. Who is the goddess of the wheat. And Ceres, I think, is one of the, she might be the oldest asteroid here. I'm not quite sure, but she's certainly one of the bigger ones here.
Yeah,
Okay.
she's the tallest.
She's and she's the first one who's discovered.
Right.
Okay. And Ceres's rank in Greek mythology is as sister to Jupiter and Pluto and Jupiter, Pluto, and Neptune. All right. So Ceres was regarded as a planet for a very long time and then was demoted down to asteroid level. I believe after Ceres's discovery was Pallas, and then I don't really know the order of Vesta and Juno. Okay, but what we have here is Takeuchi is showing that with the introduction of the asteroids into Western astrology in the 60s and the 70s, the introduction of a female presence in an astrological chart that was going to be used to balance and what later on becomes to change the narrative, to change the conversation among the planets in the way that astrologers interpreted an astrological chart. So I just wanted to take a very quick moment there to really sort of give the background on the asteroids here and my speculation as to why Takeuchi introduces them, and then she gives them to Chibiusa, because like an asteroid is a planet in a planet, a junior planet. Chibiusa is obviously a junior Usagi or Sailor.
Right. I mean, she's literally called small Usagi. Like Chibiusa is the diminutive of Usagi, and then Usa is the diminutive of Usagi, and then Chibi is Japanese for small. So small Usagi is literally what they're calling her.
And what I also want to take a very quick moment to note here is the hairstyles of the asteroids. The hairstyles of the asteroids are actually more Middle Eastern and even African. Okay, if you were looking at the hairstyles. This, I forgot which one she is, so Emily, help me out. Who's the one in pink with the loops and then the long hair strands?
Oh, that's Ceres.
Is that Ceres?
Yeah, and these hairstyles were actually very popular in K-pop and J-pop at the time as well.
But that hairstyle of Ceres, the pink asteroid, that's almost a complete replica of the hairstyle of Lilith in the original Sumerian.
Oh wow, interesting.
Statue. Yeah, if we don't have the image here, but if you look at that image, there's that same loop and then the hair going down long. So these are like Middle Eastern and even African hairstyles, along with being popular at K-pop or whatever at that period of time. So we all know that Takeuchi was playing with fashion, but you know
she knew her art history. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, and what I love is that she's fascinated by cultures and cultural history, and it's all going on in here. Okay, so we discovered that the asteroids were themselves eclipsed, and yes, the quartet was sleeping in the Amazon when they were kidnapped and brainwashed. Okay, and so they're evil, and then they discover that, you know, they've been had. And again, this is going back to the sleeper agent, you know, idea that was originally introduced in the first video of Sailor Moon, where you're asleep to who you are, and then you wake up to who you are, and you wake up to your inner truth, your actual, your identity and your origin, which, if you've ever had an astrological chart done, or if you're an astrological consultant, this is what astrology is all about, which is, you know, sort of you wake up to the planets and their relationships with one another at the time of your birth in your own birth chart. Okay, and so this is heading in that direction. Do you want to say anything more about the asteroids and Sailor Moon Eternal, Emily?
I think we kind of covered it. And can you hear me okay? I think I lost like my
No, we heard you fine.
I lost my monitor on my headphones, so I'm not sure how loud I am. But okay, great. So the interesting, I think, thing about it is it does just sort of set up the evolution of Chibiusa. It sets up her stepping into her own power. It sets up her having her own kind of micro experience of, you know, there I am. Okay, great. Of living as the future ruler of the moon, you know, and I think that that's an important concept of, you know, growing up and what were you going to say? I got distracted.
It's Pegasus, right? Pegasus is the winged horse.
Yes, Helios appears as Pegasus.
And it's after that encounter, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it after that encounter that Sailor Moon takes on the wings?
Yeah. Did
I
she
don't
have the
think the
wings
wings.
before?
I
I
don't think
think.
I don't think the wings appear before.
No, I think they appear at the end of the Infinity arc, which is the Sailor Saturn and Pharaoh 90 arc with the Holy Grail
Well,
and them coming together as the cosmic royal family, etc.
okay, I'm not sure that they appear. Well, okay, maybe someone in the audience can help us out with that. But I think they make the appearance after Helios appears. They just kind of like show up, you know, on her. But anyway, that's and hopefully we can have someone out there who will correct or do a quick book bit of research. So, do you want to talk about Sailor Cosmos?
Sure. So yeah, let's talk about Sailor Cosmos. And I was doing a quick research, but let's
Yeah,
talk about Sailor Cosmos and
we're on a show, so let's continue
kind
with
of
the show.
that whole thing is uh we just watched it. It just got released in the United States 2 days ago,
You
which
have to
is
see it,
you
okay?
have to
If
see
you
it.
haven't seen it, you have to see it. It's amazing.
It's
Okay.
been out in Japan for a year,
Mhm.
and
Those horrible Japanese having it for a year. Ugh.
well, I mean, I'm gonna watch it in Japanese anyway. If you
Right.
just give it to me now.
I'm so jealous.
Um,
I'm so jealous that it's
and
for a whole year.
the Japanese voice actors are so incredible. And I just want to say, like, one of my favorite voice actresses plays Galaxia in Sailor Moon Cosmos in the Japanese version. She's
Yeah.
in a lot of other anime and she's amazing. So if you
Okay.
recognized her voice, shout it out in the comments. Go team. Anyway, so the the whole arc of Sailor Moon Cosmos is extremely interesting in that it kind of starts, it's one of the fastest starting arcs of Sailor Moon. And I think Naoko Takeuchi knew it was the last one that she wanted to do. And I think that she just didn't want to waste a lot of time with like who's the enemy these days type of activity.
Sorry, I'm being rude. I have to disagree. No, not at all. What she's doing is that she's bringing it to a climax. She's taking the fragmented enemies and she's bringing it to the two figures. She's that's very deliberate. She's heading right there. Okay. So
I agree it's deliberate.
yeah. Um, but okay, so we're introduced to the star seeds, right? Which are a what are they called? K-pop? K-pop? No, not K-pop.
They're an
Uh,
idol group. So they're referred to as an idol group.
okay, a boy idol group. Okay, and remember that Sailor Moon appears between what?
Starlights.
Starlights, and Sailor Moon appears between what? 1991 and 1997, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a Japanese boy group, and they're like incredibly popular and all these sorts of things. Okay, and so they appear during a meteor shower, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
So it shows, I think oh, there you are. There was some bugginess on my end, so I wasn't sure what was happening.
okay, so there's starlights appear during a meteor shower that's falling on Earth, and they're looking up and they're kind of like noticing this meteor shower, and then all of a sudden there's this like new band, this all boy band, and they have long hair, and they're super duper popular, and everyone's in love with them, and Sailor Venus, who herself wanted to be a pop star, is completely in love with them, is like assigned herself like, chief fan of their club or something along these lines. And she's desperate to meet them. And of course, it's Sailor Neptune, who in Sailor Cosmos, Uranus and Neptune are suddenly back in high school and going to their school. We don't know these things. They
Uranus puts it so well. So in the manga, she says like, so Michiru, that's Neptune's human name, is Michiru. We've raised a child from infancy. We've brought peace to the planet, and now you want to go to high school? And Michiru's like, yeah, why not?
So Sailor Neptune, who's based on Midori, okay, from the 90s. Okay, so Sailor Neptune is this amazing violinist or whatever, and she just happens to be like performing with, and she knows the Starlights. And so they're all like green with envy and all these sorts of things. What we learn is that the Starlights are Sailor guardians, but they're not Sailor Guardians based on our solar system. Okay, all the Sailor Guardians up to this point are planets in our solar system. And so the Starlights are from another solar system altogether different. And they're really beautiful boys, and they've got like boy temperaments and attitudes and things like this. And when they sing, everyone's like moved by their singing, and they're super duper popular. But when they transform into Sailor Guardians, okay, they transform as female. This is something that on the episode that I recorded was an idea that I was playing around with. And I'm just going to go on a quick segue here about Uranus and then going into Starlights, and again applauding how innovative Takeuchi is with all of this, but also it's steeped in astrological history. The planet Uranus in astrology was always related to homosexuality, okay? And this comes from Karl Heinrich Ulrichs, who was not an astrologer, and he had no knowledge of astrology or interest in it. But Karl Heinrich Ulrichs in the 19th century stood up for gay rights. He's really the first gay rights activist in the German Empire. And he was a lawyer. He postulated this theory based on Plato's Symposium that gay people, okay, or if you were a gay man or a gay woman, if you were a gay man, you were a female soul that was housed in a man's body. And if you were a gay woman, you were a male soul that had been housed in a female body. And so this was his thesis. Plato's Symposium talks about Uranus as being really the parent god of Aphrodite Urania. Okay, there were two Aphrodites, Aphrodite Pandamos and Aphrodite Urania. Aphrodite Urania was the heavenly Aphrodite, and Aphrodite Pandamos was the earthly Aphrodite. You can kind of think of Aphrodite Urania as Barbie and Aphrodite Pandemos as Skipper. Okay, so Aphrodite Urania was higher love, and this was something that was experienced in Greek society with adult men and younger boys. Okay, this is kind of where it all starts. All right, so this is in Plato's Symposium, where there's a debate about the creation, or there's a discussion about the creation of humankind, children of the sun, children of the moon, and children of earth. And they were basically gay men, gay women, and heterosexuals. Okay, all of this through Karl Heinrich Ulrichs was associated with the word Uranus. Ulrichs was only using Uranus as the deity, okay, and as a model. Male souls in female bodies, female souls in male bodies. This gets picked up by astrologers through the British astrologers in the late 19th to early 20th century, so that Uranus becomes associated with homosexuality in an astrological chart. Okay, so that's why, as an astrologer, I was fascinated that when Sailor Uranus shows up, it's in a gay relationship. But I was also playing around with the idea of gender fluidity. As you have experienced earlier in this episode, I have a tendency to sort of jump ahead, you know, and
You're jumping ahead.
and what I hadn't really fully appreciated, and this is why I love reading the comment section, is everyone was saying, no, Sailor Uranus is a woman, you know. But I was jumping ahead in terms of the star seeds. Okay, the star seeds are they switch genders. You know, they're maybe perhaps what we could call gender fluid. All right, but they are in the realm that's, if you remember the Chaldean order of the planets, it's the realm that's beyond the planets, and it's the realm of eternity. And by the way, Uranus in Greek mythology, before it was named a planet, was Father Heaven. Okay, so the fixed stars that lived beyond Saturn were Uranus, in the sense that they were the eternal stars, the fixed stars, stars that never died. So this gender fluidity is what Takeuchi is picking up with the star seeds. I wanted to just sort of share that because that gets back into astrological history, its association with Uranus, but she actually went with it with the star seeds. All of this is to, again, really underscore how ahead of her time she was with Sailor Uranus, and also what makes Sailor Uranus evergreen, because she made a space in the Sailor universe cosmos for queer identity. And she did it long before astrologers in the West did that. And so I was fascinated to sort of see, okay, that's how she worked with the Karl Heinrich Ulrichs. That's how she moves it on into the story of Sailor Moon. But what we're dealing with here is this idea of other galaxies or other solar systems, other star systems. Okay, so she's opened up, she's broadened our margins here. She's taken us out of the solar system, and in Sailor Moon Cosmos, she's taking us into the galaxy itself.
Right. And I think so this wasn't a totally uncommon thing in Japanese anime and in Japanese artistic representations prior to Naoko Takeuchi doing it. I think it was very revolutionary for Western audiences. But for Japanese audiences, it was not really that surprising for them. I think just based on prior knowledge of animes that came out in the 90s, such as Ranma 1/2, if you're very interested in seeing somebody, switch genders every time they sneeze, Ranma 1/2 is the anime for you. So the point I'm trying to make is, I think that it's important that we also recognize that Haruka Tenno is a lesbian and she's in a lesbian relationship, and that's perfectly fine. And what's really cool about that is, well, what's funny about that, like I said earlier, the North American censors made it weird by dubbing it weird. It didn't need it. It could have just been cool, and we could have just been cool about it then.
Right.
But what's great is we're really cool about it now, and it's
right.
And they have representation, and we love it. And it's part of the whole, the whole thing that I really loved about Sailor Moon is it made this really, really great space for women to be strong women without being, while also embracing their femininity, while also embracing themselves as, girls, as girly girls, as the feminine urge to be a princess, a little girl, and a grown adult all at the same time. And the experience of growing up in the society of women, where frequently, especially in Western cultural representations, women are usually tearing each other down. I mean, one of the best performing movies in the last 20 years was Mean Girls.
Right. Which
and Sailor Moon is the antithesis of that.
Right. Absolutely.
It is about, protecting the princess, banding together as women, being Sailor Scouts and being hot and having a fun time and fashionable as heck, so fashionable. And I think that that's so important as a message.
It's absolutely
for people
important.
who are growing up at that time. And so I think that you make a really good point that Haruka's just Haruka, and that's great. We love that for her.
Right, but what I wanted to get to was that she was, what I'm always fascinated about, and this is my thing, is how she's basing it on the astrology and on
I think it's incredible that she did that.
Yeah, and that the star seeds, they're actually coming from astrological history here. I mean, being Uranian, and that was the phrase. Being Uranian meant being
no way.
Okay. No, yeah. Oh, you didn't know that was the phrase. You have the Uranian poets in Britain. And it was this idea of Uranian was the word used before homosexuality. It was coined before homosexuality. And what's so fascinating about it is that astrologers, because they heard the word Uranus and there was a planet Uranus, just sort of moved it over into the Uranus column. But again, oh no, it's as simple as that. But Takeuchi is there was a very long history of like stars being androgyne, of being of both
Oh
gender,
yeah.
all these sort of things. What I wanted to also sort of very quickly interject here, if I may, is the idea of star seeds, being associated to life, which is a constant reference in Sailor Moon, Cosmos. And Sailor Moon Cosmos begins with shooting stars, which are kind of like comets, right? It's a star that goes across the sky. I
Yeah.
just wanted to read to you this idea to add to the conversation. It's from an article that was published September 9th in 2006 in the Financial Times. And the heading of it was Origins Written in the Comets. And it says, comets are fluff balls with a high amount of organic material, the stuff that may have seeded Earth with the ingredients for life. Scientists reached this conclusion in their first in-depth analysis of NASA's Deep Impact mission, which slammed a probe into the comet Tempe on July 4th. I love it, July 4th, which is Cancer, and Cancer is motherhood. But anyway, origin. Okay, but anyway, NASA's Deep Impact mission, which slammed a probe into the comet Tempe on July 4th. By observing the particles from the crash with a telescope, researchers concluded that comets are more than 50% ice particles. One surprise was the presence of clay and carbonates, the stuff of seashells, since scientists have always believed those materials can only form in the presence of liquid water. Comets are believed to be the pristine remnants from the earliest days of the solar system. The findings were presented at this, scientific board or whatever. But anyway, this was the beginning of the theory that comets seeded life, like birds eating flower seeds and flying over someone's garden and sitting there and going, doing bird poop or something like that. Comets were the version of birds doing bird poop and spreading seeds around. Comets were doing the same thing, and they were sort of showering these particles on planets. And the theory was, at least back in 2006, that this was exactly what was going on. This is about 9 or 10 years after Takeuchi has worked with the star seeds. But here, listen to Starlights. Okay, Starlights. But
It's Starlights, yeah.
Starlights, right? Like Starlights.
I'll give you a trick to remembering it in a minute.
Okay, but there is a seeding quality here, and this is the theory. This is a theme that's brought up in Sailor Moon Cosmos, that not only are we not the only sailors, but there have been seeds that have been planted by stars on other planets, or star crystals that have been planted in other entities. Okay, so she's really sort of setting up this more cosmic stage that Sailor Moon is now going to enter into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to make a quick note and kind of there's some comments about how like it's totally like there's nobody bats an eye at the gay relationships in Sailor Moon within the context of the world of Sailor Moon. And I just want to like say there's a YouTuber, and I'll put the name in the comment section. Her name is Tiran J Zhao, and I think I said that close to what it is. She does a lot of really cool videos on Chinese empire history and Confucian belief, and how that impacts and the same-sex relationships that occurred in that time period, and how Confucian belief impacted that. Because there's Confucian belief doesn't really care who you're in love with, it cares that you produce children. So you were, there was an encouragement of like have your romantic relationships, but definitely produce children. So she covers that a lot. She's also an author, so I'll put her name in the comment section. I've learned a lot from her.
And send me the link.
I will, absolutely.
Okay. The comment section disappears every time I
and yeah, exactly. But the my point is that because of the, you know, relationship between China and Japan, Confucianism did have an impact in Japan, and those
Yeah.
Confucian beliefs did persist in some manner in Japan. And so there are elements of their culture that existed to support these things that Western culture did not necessarily have.
Oh yeah.
So just wanted to throw that out there for anybody who is curious about Asian history and the cultures and the impacts of that, if they wanted to look at it. So I'm going to throw that in there right now because I got it pulled up, and that's the name right there. But I love the Starlights in particular. I want to talk about the Starlights for a second. So their names are Ko Taiki, Ko Yutan, and Ko Seya. And Ko means light. So all of their names have a relationship to light. And then their first name, so their last name, Ko means light. And then their first names are night sky, atmosphere, and field of stars in that order. So it's really beautiful that they're, you know, the Starlights, but then they have these, of course, very naturally representative names that she's given to them, very much in her way of naming her characters after what they are as Sailor Guardians.
Right.
But what's really beautiful about what the Starlights are doing is they're also looking for their princess. They don't know where she's gone. And she has been displaced from her planet by a Darth Vader type of character, Sailor Galaxia, who is kind of trying to unify the galaxy. And in doing so is just destroying planets and taking their sailor crystals. So I think that there's like a displacement of the body. And I loved the role that the body plays in the Cosmos arc, especially as it relates to how the moon represents the body.
Right.
And I love that there's a physical destruction of bodies in the Cosmos arc. Like, because your crystal represents your body. Your crystal is a part of your body and your physical manifestation. Well, if you take the crystal,
the body,
their body disintegrates, is what I'm saying. So
it's housed. It's that
idea. Housed, yeah.
The word that you used with me earlier. It's housed in the body. What this comes from, and we're all familiar with the phrase ashes to ashes, dust to dust at a funeral, you know, when someone passes. And of course, they're all rendered to dust, you know, when the sailor crystals are stolen from each one of the characters. You reminded me of something that I wanted to introduce very quickly. In Persian, it's not Persian mythology, it's Persian religion, and I think it's Zoroastrianism. There is this idea that the stars in the sky are the campfires of the gods. Okay, so that when you look out at a starry night, you're looking at the campfires of the gods. And these are flames, you know, it's a campfire, it's flame. And what happens is that as these flames crackle, they spit out sparks. Okay, this is Persian in origin. And so the sparks fly into the night and they sort of like hover there. And then they're drawn one by one by one by one down through the heavenly spheres. Remember, I talked about the seven heavens. In Gnosticism, they're drawn down through the heavenly spheres, and each spark is blessed by a planet on its way down to Earth. All right. And what happens is that when a baby is born, okay, the child has been in the womb, and now the child is being born, and the baby cries out, you know, with that cry out, that you know, of consciousness, that spark which came from that heavenly campfire inhabits the child. Okay, and this plays a big role in Neoplatonism, that we were made up of two parts, a soul and a spirit. The soul, as I was referencing earlier, returns to the moon, okay, where it leaves the moon and it reincarnates, okay, it comes back again. And reincarnation is a big theme in Sailor Moon. But the spirit that came down from the campfires of the gods and houses itself, that animates, the child cries out and now can see and is now animated, because spirit is the idea of animating. Okay. And Gnosticism was the light going off in the body so that you could see. It's based on a flame that everybody carried. When someone died, okay, that flame flies back up to the stars in the sky. So we were made up of soul and spirit. The soul returned to the moon, where it would grow full and then wane in its light and then return into reincarnation. And the spirit flew back up to the stars. And that, I just wanted to share with you, is an analogy, or is what Takeuchi is working with the star crystal. The star crystal is, it animates the body. It's hosted in the body, but when it's taken from the body by Galaxia, who is the starry heavens herself, right?
Right.
She's gathering that up. Then the body disintegrates. It's dust. It's nothing, because it no longer has its star crystal, or the Persian understanding, it no longer has its spirit or its vitality.
Beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful and totally accurate to what is represented in Cosmos. I mean, it's incredible, like, just how quickly Cosmos is definitely one of the darkest and most dramatic of the arcs.
Oh yeah.
As it gets, very quickly into the themes of, do we continue after death? And I mean, obviously we're in the Sailor Moon universe, they've all been reincarnated, so yes is the answer. But Sailor Galaxia is dealing with a lot of trauma, which I think is another element of the moon that is brought up
Right.
in this arc, is trauma and
Right.
trauma bonding. And not only does she doesn't necessarily want to fight Sailor Moon, she wants to team up with Sailor Moon. She wants Sailor Moon to help her destroy the one person who caused her the most harm, which was chaos,
Right.
which was the like you brought up earlier, the cauldron of chaos. She wants Sailor Moon to bring complete order to the universe
Right.
from the disorder that destroyed her life.
Right.
And I mean, we have the Starlights, which are awesome. I mean, the Starlights are just so great. And if you ever get a chance to look up just search for Sailor Stars, Sailor Moon musical on YouTube. It is the one from 1997 is so great. And I had no idea I'd be such a nerd about it. But I cannot stop talking about it. I think it's so funny and so fun and just a good experience. But I digress. The Sailor Starlights are bringing this power to Sailor Moon that she would not have in this situation, because all of her guardians have been destroyed. Like at the final point where she begins the third act of the series is where she's, completely replete of
Right.
her Sailor guardians. They're gone.
Right. Right.
And the Sailor Starlights are all that's left for her, along with the princess that they came to find, Princess Keikyu, from their planet.
Right.
And it is so it's interesting how Naoko Takeuchi takes this opportunity to introduce these different themes of let's see, what was it? There's a Buddhist theme to Keikyu, and I need to pull it up in my notes, of how she is representative of like the fire and like the light and the rebirth that is about to occur at the end of Cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the Greek Lethe and Mnemosyne. You have the rivers of the underworld. And so you were talking earlier about how in Dante's
Inferno,
yeah. He's descending into the underworld. This is where Sailor Moon does her descent into the other underworld. And every month, the lunar cycle, the moon is born, it comes to culmination, and then then it dies again. And
Right.
that's the cycle of the moon. And in the anime and the manga, she's provided that same arc. She
Right.
comes into culmination and then she goes back to the beginning.
Right.
She comes into culmination and goes back to the beginning, and it's this beautiful cyclical thing. So we have different themes in this one. We have the importance of a physical body. What does a physical body mean to your identity? Is your star seed or your sailor crystal all that's important about you? Just because it still exists and being reborn, is that really the ultimate cycle? And Usagi disagrees. She says, my physical body is important. My sailor guardian's physical bodies are important. This is how we look each other in the eye. This is how we communicate.
Yeah, but she's forced to give that up. I mean, what you're sparking in my imagination is Dante's Inferno and Paradiso again. She does a descent, you know, and
no, she does.
Yeah.
I'm not saying she doesn't. What I'm saying is that, you know, she keeps getting told by the Starlights, it's okay. As long as the crystals are intact, they can be reborn. And she's like, no, it's not okay that their bodies were destroyed. That physically pains me. That brings me great sorrow.
I see what you're saying. You're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
And the trauma of the body being gone, the trauma of Galaxia's loss causing her to take people's physical bodies it's just a very lunar theme.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's not, I don't think it's the cauldron of chaos. I think chaos is in the cauldron, but it's the cauldron of stars. It's the cauldron of stars, because what she returns to with that, no, you're absolutely right. And thank you for correcting me, because she's saying the human experience is important. Being in a body is important. Catching one another's eyes, being in love, making love, having friendship, supporting one another.
Yeah, having families.
These things are important, and indeed, that's what she's going to draw upon. You know, because you're right. Because Galaxia is coming from trauma. You know, Galaxia is coming from a world that was destroyed, and so it's her anger at that weakness. And you've got two battling ideologies here: the ideology of darkness and the ideology of light. Okay, and in the figures of Sailor Moon and Galaxia, you know, Galaxia is get rid of your humanity, get rid of your silly little cats and chibi-usas and friends and
your silly little sentiments, which is all what the moon is. I mean, your nostalgias, your experiences, your memories.
Right, your memory of self.
Yeah.
You know, the remembered self. And so, and Galaxia is denying her past, her moon, her, you know, she's denying that her anger and her trauma is coming out of that. But she's really setting up an ideology in the universe. I can unite the universe under my vision, which is born of having been victimized and hurt, and ensuring that only the strong survive. I mean, Galaxia is really kind of a voice, a proponent of eugenics here. You know, it's only the pure or the strongest. No, she is. Well, listen to her. She's talking about you're weak, you're weak, you're weak. You're a failed planet. You're a failed civilization. You know, she's rendering these judgments as she goes and collects these star seeds, or these star crystals. And what's beautiful about Sailor Moon is that she's coming out of that lunar vulnerability, that sentimentality. Galaxia keeps wanting her to be world wrestling. Let's wrestle with one another. I'm provoking you. I'm getting you very angry. I'm going to get you really to sort of grow up and leave behind, you know, these silly little cats and little chibis and all this crap, and like, you know, become
grow up.
Right, a kick-ass.
Be hard.
Right, grow up, be hard, become a kick-ass cosmic force.
Right.
You know, and she can't, because that's not who she is. You know, and the beautiful, what happens in Sailor Moon that's so beautiful is she's always being reminded of who she is. You know, always. And so that's why when she loses her memory, you know, when Lethe takes away her memory, she's been part of like what is, you know, but she's always reminded of who she is. She's reminded of who she is by her friends. She's reminded of who she is by Mama-chan, and who she is someone that they make fun of all the time,
But she loves it.
and she loves it.
She loves it.
And Sailor Mars, for instance, is always kind of like, oh, you've powered down from Sailor Moon and you're back to Usagi again, and you can't even like complete a test. I mean, like
Right. Yeah.
she's
She's
always
like, she's
fun
rolling her eyes.
in this wonderful way. She still writes in girlish script when she writes notes from the 30th century, and she's, Queen Serenity, I
Right.
mean, like, she's still Sailor Moon. And that's where you're so right, Emily, when you say the body matters. I was hearing it literally, but the body, the memories, the habits, everything that the body has come from, the body matters. And in so many different spiritual beliefs, the body doesn't matter, or it's seen as something that you need to transcend or get past, that your experience here on
Right.
earth is something that is going to corrupt or tempt or take you down, or whatever. But despite all the seductions and the persuasions and the traps and the ethical moral dilemmas that Sailor Moon falls into, she's always being reminded of Usagi, of she's a girl,
Right. And like we actually learned that it was, her mother brought Princess Serenity's star crystal to this place that they end up at the end of Cosmos to have her reincarnated. And when she was reincarnated as Usagi. She chose it for herself to be a regular girl. She didn't need to be anything special.
Right.
And that's what is really beautiful about the experience of the moon and the sign of Cancer, really, like, is just so, your everyday life is what makes you human. Your everyday experiences are what make you, a human and lovable and relatable, and you're perfect just as you are, is really the message of Sailor Moon. Is you are perfect just as you are. And you don't have to be like that other person. You can be you. And that's what's kind of beautiful about, I mean, they bring in this very like small, like literally small character named Chibi Chibi in this arc. And what she represents is like the Sailor Moon potentiality of this extreme future. And when she's asked who she is, she just says, I'm me.
Right. It's well, we get to a fascinating spot in this conflict between Sailor Galaxia, Galaxia, right?
Galaxia, yeah.
Sailor Galaxia and Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon embraces Galaxia, because Galaxia is expecting an adversary, and Sailor Moon, I mean, it goes back to when Chibiusa transforms into Dark Lady, and all these things, horrible things are really revealed. But Sailor Moon is just, she's a kid, and she's my kid, and this is my husband, and so Sailor Moon has this. It's not a pious forgiveness. It's a forgiveness that comes out of, what would I do in that position, and in that place, it comes out of that commonplaceness, and her capacity of forgiveness is always learned. She's always learning how much more of that comes out of her naturally. But at the end, she won't be the adversary to Galaxia at all. She won't give Galaxia the fight. In fact, Sailor Moon, in her continual lunar bonding, because this is what Cancers do, and this is what a moon does, it bonds. She's, okay, Galaxia may be my last friend. This may be the only friend I have here at the end of the universe.
Right, at the end of the universe, at the end of everything.
And so she's friends with Galaxia.
She just embraces, and that's like, it's very, so let's, I'm going to talk about Jupiter Cancer, but it's important, and I promise it's relevant. So Jupiter, the sky god, is exalted in Cancer. Mm-hmm. And Jupiter was known for coming down and just knocking on doors as a beggar. And you invite him in, and he will bless your house. He will bless you with great riches and, wealth and wonderful experiences. And Naoko Takeuchi has she's a Pisces with Jupiter exalted in Cancer.
Right.
And that is absolutely the experience of Sailor Moon as a character, is embracing you at their dinner table.
Yeah.
Please come in.
Right. Well,
please come in. Have a seat.
Sailor Moon's earthly mother does nothing but open up her house to
anyone and says,
Right.
"Oh, you're my new kid. Come on in."
Right.
And it's
or my
it's
new
really,
cat, whatever.
my new cat. And
Right.
yeah, absolutely, I'll take in these additional cats, no problem.
Right.
And like, it's really this beautiful, it's just such a beautiful it's just such a beautiful representation of just loving people from where they're at and how they came there and where they came from, and not putting any judgments on them. And that's sort of what I want to try and like communicate about it.
And isn't Takeuchi also born with a Neptune and Scorpio? Am I remembering that correctly?
I think she's got a grand trine in water.
She's got a grand trine in water, but the ruling planets, okay, the way I work in astrology is that the ruling planet is the planet that rules your sun sign. Mm-hmm. She's a Pisces, so there are two planetary rulers, Jupiter and Neptune. Okay, so when Takeuchi powers up, she's like, Jupiter power, Neptune power. Okay, like that's what happens in her chart. Okay, and then she's got Jupiter exalted, Neptune, the modern ruler of Pisces. They're both trining the sun in Pisces. And this water trine theme is throughout the entire it's throughout the entire series. Okay, because water evaporates, goes to the sky, falls as rain, is water, and then evaporates, goes to the sky. That cycle of becoming, unbecoming, and becoming is something that's associated with the grand trine in water. And you have at the end, we're being spoilers here for Cosmos, but you have at this end this Sailor Moon goes to try to, Sailor Galactica, turns to dust because chaos comes and claims her star crystal. And Sailor Moon doesn't go to battle chaos, but goes to try to, Jupiter in Cancer, expand herself in such a way as to understand chaos. She becomes the new cauldron. She's trying to become the new cauldron of stars. Okay. She's taking over the mother of the universe and the mothering of the universe. It's a sacrifice, but it's more than a sacrifice. She's sacrificing to become something that can embody. Okay, right, Emilie? Body, moon, body, that can embody, that can hold within it all, that can hold within it order and chaos. I mean, Christopher, it's the Taoist symbol, right? It's yin and yang. She's reaching to become that circle that yin and yang appear in. Okay, that's what she's trying to do. And that's the thing that Chibi Chibi, who's really the reincarnation of the future self, that's why she's a child. It's her future thing. I think it's Lambda Sailor Moon or something like that, or Sailor Moon couldn't make
Sailor Cosmos.
Sailor Cosmos couldn't do that, because at the final moment Sailor Cosmos was too afraid and she backed away. She couldn't make that final sacrifice, and it's Sailor Moon who makes that final sacrifice. That Sailor Cosmos is like, I couldn't do that, but now I am emboldened by Sailor Moon's action. And that's what brings about the entire reset. I mean, they go and they live. Remember, the moon is associated to reincarnation. She goes and she meets the other souls of the other sailors, and they meet the spirit or the goddess of the cauldron itself.
That's Guardian Cosmos, by the way.
Guardian Cosmos, right.
Don't know why they're different, but they are.
But anyway, it's what we're dealing with constantly in Sailor Moon is spiritual evolution. It starts with the kind of video game, you go to the next level when you vanquish, and by the time we get to Sailor Cosmos, she's evolving. But she gets a choice of what kind of future she wants to have. Do you want to be by yourself without the fear of loss of friends and things like this? Or do you want your friends? I mean, she's being given a choice between what her strengths are. Do you want to be reincarnated as, an uber self, or do you want to be reincarnated with your friends, with the people that you love so dearly? And of course, that's a no-brainer for Sailor Moon. She wants to be
Right.
reincarnated, with her friends. And again, what we get here is this beautiful, the things that are made fun of in our society nowadays: sentimentality, you know, silly moments with your friends, your common everyday life. These are heroic virtues. These are the things, when everyone's like, how do you solve world problems? And you get philosophical, or you take on economic theories, or talk about history or utopian visions. It's always getting back to, as you were saying earlier, Emilie, the life you're living, the body you're living in, the friends and the associations that you have in your life. And that if you can extend your circle of love that you have of friends and family to other solar systems, other galaxies, other people you do not know, if you can extend that feeling to all the people you don't know, as they say in Sailor Cosmos, the stars, when they're born, feel like they're alone. But Sailor Moon's argument to that is the stars are not alone. They fill the heavens.
Mm.
So stars don't have to be lonely lights. They fill the heavens. And she's saying that about the human soul as well. You don't have to be born alone into the world. Take the people that you love, that it could be a stranger, an acquaintance, it could be a lover, it could be a best friend, it could be someone you work with, someone you walk your dog with, someone, you both go and take in cats with, or birds, or whatever have you. They don't have to be the penultimate relationship in your life, because stars are surrounded by planets. We are surrounded by different relationships of different levels. And her message is, if you see that, or that thing that you've always known and done in your life is your destiny, it is your strength, it is your source of power, your source of love, your source of wisdom, your reason for living.
Right.
That's
Now, I rewatched the last 10 or 20 minutes of Cosmos like 10 times or something, because there was a lot of information that was dropped at the end. And I think it's actually Chaos and Galactica that merge into one at the end and become the
no,
new.
no. Galactica's taken. Chaos was always collecting the crystals, and so Galactica becomes just another.
I think that Cosmos
Yeah,
talks about
let's
how they merged, but
okay.
That that I found interesting, and it represented it. If that's the case, what it represented to me was Galaxia's acceptance and healing of her trauma, release of her trauma by becoming accepting and embracing of chaos, which is what Sailor Cosmos says about Sailor Moon. She actually embraced and accepted chaos and was able to become one with it. And by Galaxia also embracing and accepting chaos, by merging with chaos,
Mm-hmm.
she can finally move on from her trauma, which is just very much the healing powers of the moon.
Mm-hmm.
The experience of your mother, holding you, or your father holding you, whoever was your, comforting figure in your life, coming to you and being that maternal figure and patting you on the back and kissing your knee and putting a bandage on it, or telling you to get back up on the bike again, or
Yeah.
making you move forward with things. And by healing that trauma, you can continue.
It's fascinating. Uh, for me, at that end, it's light and darkness. Um, And what Sailor Moon has to do is embrace both light and darkness. That chaos isn't to be routed out. Chaos as other, isn't to be routed out or demonized or thrown out of the universe.
Mm.
That it has a place in the universe. That the two ideologies of light and darkness. What is a continual theme in Sailor Moon? Villains are coming after her because they are drawn to the silver crystal. Okay, they're drawn to her light. Okay, darkness is drawn to light, but darkness isn't subservient to light. Light is supported in darkness. Light can't be light without darkness. So chaos is darkness, and light. Sailor Moon as light. She doesn't accept you have to go dark to beat dark, or you have to beat dark, you have to get rid of it. It's such a great message nowadays, even in our political culture. You don't have to rout out the other. You can be a regular person. Your neighbor can have different beliefs than you, or whatever. That doesn't mean you have to go and destroy one another, or convert, or yell, or harangue, or have these fights. You can broaden so that and so, because they speculated about the future. Will there be no more chaos in the future? I mean, the constant theme in cosmos is the fight over. Do we always have to fight? Do we always have to fight? And it's left like there may be chaos in the future, but you know what? That doesn't have to be a deal breaker. That doesn't have to be something that has to be destroyed. In fact, it's trying to destroy it that brings out maybe the worst or the darkness in people. So what's it like? And I love what you're bringing up about trauma. It's like, what's it like if you let love and trauma coexist? Does there have to be such a robust healing? Like, what's it like if you just let it be?
Right.
Rather than being an answer to a quandary or a problem.
Or like having to always fix it. Like it
Right.
doesn't, there's nothing. Sometimes the best way to heal is to stop fussing with something. Like if you fiddle, my dad would just say stop fiddling with it, or
Mhm.
my mom would say, stop scratching it, because I get mosquito bites a lot, so I would always be fussing with it, or fiddling with it, or like making it way worse because I was paying so much attention to it. So
Right.
by paying close attention, or like really like trying to fix something, you can perpetuate a problem. And that was really what Galaxia's arc was about.
I know I messed you up on the pronunciation. Okay.
It's
Right.
okay. It's what her arc was about. Was she was constantly trying to fix a problem, when really she wasn't able to just cope or process the trauma by letting it be processed, letting it heal, embracing it by being one with the experience that she had. Instead, she went out there and destroyed planets.
Well, she's powered by
Which
her.
is like really extreme.
Well, right. I'm wiping you out for your own good, because I believe, because my way of living is right.
Right.
Might makes right.
You don't know what the trauma is, and I'm saving you from that.
Right. And I think it's also based on autocratic societies. It's just, this is the solution and we're putting it in. Did you feel that her motifs, her tempo was very Middle Eastern in look?
No, I thought she was very Roman.
No, her look was Roman, right? Her outfit, but the architecture and the tapestries and the patterns and things like that struck me as like almost pyramids at some point, or Middle Eastern. I don't know, maybe I'm fantasizing, but I kind of felt like it was Takeuchi's Ode to Hellenistic Astrology.
It did have a bit of a Hellenistic vibe.
Yeah, because it was.
I felt it was more Byzantine, to be honest with you.
Well, yeah, I know. Well, I know. I mean, this is me fantasizing, but it was almost like it was Roman occupied Egypt.
It felt like Roman occupied Constantinople. Byzantium. Constantinople era, like the seat of the Holy Roman Empire, early medieval period.
Yeah. And I thought that was a statement. you know.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, because I felt like that was like an ode to astrology, to Western astrology, because um, Hellenistic astrology comes over to Japan on the Silk routes, along with Arabic astrology and Chinese astrology and Taoism, soaks it up in Buddhism. I mean, it's incredibly eclectic, Japanese astrology. So do we have any parting remarks or comments or questions?
Thanks for 2 hours of this. This was
Right,
a
because
blast. We
you
went
guys
through a
have
lot of
been
topics.
2 hours.
Wow. I mean, like, I just hope I didn't say anything stupid. I'm sure
Oh,
someone will point it out if I did.
honey, if you said something stupid, I'm sure someone will point it out.
Love you. Be nice.
Love you. Be nice. We want to thank you so much for. Oh! I just have to come up with last thing, okay? Before we
Oh,
go.
yeah. Okay. Parting blows. Let's go.
No parting observation. Shango. Okay,
What?
Shango? Isn't that the name of her brother?
Shingo.
Shingo. Okay, where the hell has Shingo been for this entire like Shingo comes up at the end, like
Right.
her little brother. Like, where the hell has he been for Sailor Moon Crystal, Sailor Moon Turtle, Sailor Moon, and Shingo shows up at the end of Sailor Moon Cosmos, kicking her in the butt and saying, why are you being so weird or whatever. I think it's hysterical. Because didn't the same thing happen in Hana Yori Dango or something? It's just like, the little brother gets introduced and
You mean
forgotten.
Boys Over Flowers?
Right, Boys Over Flowers, like the little brother that doesn't mean anything. But anyway, it's like
they like make a joke about that.
End. I don't know. I just thought that was the most hysterical thing.
What I loved about that, actually, I think that was really great, by the way, that he does just show up, like, and he's like, I wish I had an older sister who wasn't so useless.
Right,
and
exactly.
like and like vibes, dude. Like, that was great. So what I love about the rando little brother is, like, whenever Chibiusa's there, he's not.
Right.
And then, like,
right.
I don't know why. I couldn't explain to you where he's been. But what I liked about him is he's just so, like, he's so humanizing of Usagi. He's the only one who's like, you're not a princess. You're just my weird older sister.
Well, her parents were like that too. Her parents
right. Well, her parents are like, you have to sleep outside if you get C's, like, in English, or D's in English. What does she bring home in the first manga?
Anyway, it's just so, and it's a lunar cycle. We come back to,
we came back to the beginning of where she's standing outside the house, and he's like, Mom, lock you out again.
Oh my God, you're right.
Yeah.
We'll circle back to.
Circled back to, like, the first episode.
Okay. Well, on that note, because I just had to mention Shingo before we
good old Shingo. He does deserve a moment in
we
the
want
sun.
to thank you so much for joining us here on Christopher Renstrom Astrology and this special live episode of Sailor Moon. And thank you so much for viewing in and for subscribing and for really being terrific.
Really
wonderful people to meet in the comment section. It's absolutely wonderful. You keep us going, through your love and your support and your kindness, and we very much appreciate it. And we will see you next time. We've got a live coming up for the month of September, and we will be doing Mystery Chart again. But thank you for joining us for Sailor Moon, the Astrology of Sailor Moon live, and we'll see you next time. Okay.
Thank you all.
Bye.